Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we're back at it with another spoiler video for Magic the Gathering's Avatar: The Last Airbender expansion. This time we're going to cover all of the cards spoiled during day 1 of spoiler season that weren't covered in the debut video. They spoiled so many cards on day 1 that we split it up into 2. We did all of the cards that were spoiled in the debut video in another video already, and if you haven't seen that yet, I'm going to link that in the comments and in the description so that you guys can check that out if you haven't, because there's a number of crazy cards in that video that we go over as well. But everything else that was spoiled on day 1, we're going to cover right here. And then on the heels of this video, we've got another video coming with even more spoilers covering all of the spoilers from day 2. So lots of spoilers on the way. There's a lot to get through, so we're going to dive right in. Before we do, please like the video. It helps me get the video out to so many more people, which in turn helps the channel to grow. And it honestly means more to me than I can express with words, you guys that are helping me out by hitting that like button. So please hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. Tons of crazy spoiler content on the way, a few really cool deck tech ideas as well that I'll be dropping soon, and a couple of surprises that I can't tell you about yet, but lots of cool stuff on the way. So hit that subscribe button, let's dive in and let's do the thing. First off, we have Cycle of Renewal, an instant lesson for 1 green and 2. Sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. I think this card is actually kind of insane. It's a lot like Harrow. It's instant speed, which is nuts. You can do it on your opponent's turn after holding up mana to make sure that you don't need to use interaction or counter spells or card draw instead. You just pivot and play this at the end of their turn, which is awesome. You can trigger landfall during your opponent's turn or during a combat step as a trick, which is also really cool. But another thing that's worth pointing out about this is it is the lesson subtype. So in older decks that have learn cards, have access to learn cards, you can put this in your sideboard and just fetch it out of your sideboard. And if the new Strixhaven set coming next year brings back learn cards, this card gets even more powerful in standard, because then you can start putting stuff like this in your sideboard and just fetch it when you need it with the learn cards. So we don't know for sure if that's coming next year with Strixhaven, but it's definitely a possibility, and all of these lesson cards could get way more powerful if that's the case. Next up, we've got Yip Yip. 1 white mana for an instant lesson. Target creature gets +2/+2, and if it's an ally, it also gains flying. Nice little combat trick for limited. The flying's going to matter a little bit more than people realize at first, I think. Just giving your biggest dude flying and swinging him for the win is a nice way that you can kind of pivot with this, and adds a little bit of versatility to a card that will otherwise most of the time just be used as a combat trick to kill their dude and make sure that yours survives. Next up, we've got Cunning Maneuver, an instant for 1 red and 1. This is not a lesson, and target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn. Create a clue token. For standard, I have a feeling that a 2 mana buff spell is just going to be too expensive. There's just so many good 1 mana buff spells that the prowess decks have access to and stuff like that. But for limited, I actually think this is really good, and it basically cantrips, replaces itself with another card. Sure, it's in the form of a clue token that you have to dump more mana into later, but in limited, you usually have time to make that happen. So just being able to replace this card with another card eventually, but getting a nice little combat trick, or potentially even in the end game, a way to buff your Alpha Strike to just get the win a turn earlier. A lot of cool stuff happening with this card in limited for sure. Next up, we've got Zuko's Exile, an instant lesson for 5 colorless mana. Exile an artifact, creature, or enchantment. Its controller creates a clue token. Now, this looks really expensive on the surface, but the fact that it's only common and it's completely colorless means this is an absolute bomb. Well, I wouldn't call it a bomb, but it's an absolute must play, must draft. No, that's not the right way to refer to it either. Absolutely important card in limited, I'll say. it's going to be really easy to pick up stuff like this in the last half of a pack. You know, it tables once, and when it comes back to you, if you're a little light on removal, you can easily jam one of these into your deck. Because it's colorless, it can fit into any deck. It doesn't matter the colors, and that actually kind of makes it a little bit more of a premium in limited because of that. And it can hit any permanent, right? Any problematic permanent. It's not just creature removal. So the versatility of being able to hit anything, to be able to put it in literally any color deck, and to replace itself with another card that you get to draw off the clue token later on, just makes it so much bang for your buck when it comes to a limited format. So I think this card's actually going to be really good. Not quite good enough to first pick or anything like that, but it definitely isn't going to last very long after tabling at the table. It's going to be one of those cards that goes away really quick in the bottom half of a deck, or bottom half of a pack. Yeah. Next up, we've got Water Tribe Rallier, a 2/2 human soldier ally for 1 white and 1, and it water bends 5 to look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a creature with power 3 or less, put into your hand, put the rest on the bottom in a random order. We've seen creatures like this before that have this ability to dig. I think we actually had a 1-drop that did something similar to this that just recently rotated out of standard. But one thing that puts this card a little bit ahead, well, I guess 2 things. First of all, it's an ally, and the ally creature type in this set is going to be incredibly important. It's almost kind of like a super tribe. There are going to be more allies in this set, at least it seems from the cards we've seen already, than any particular tribe typically gets within a set. So anything that helps allies is going to be at a premium in this set, and anything that is an ally so it can grab those synergies is also going to be a little bit better than it otherwise would be. So right off the bat, that matters. But this Waterbend 5 ability is really interesting as well, and even though 5 mana seems like a lot on the surface, the fact that you can pivot and just tap creatures instead of spending mana, or some combination of the two, is what makes this card so useful. Potentially holding up a bunch of blockers, even just playing a bunch of vigilance creatures, attacking and still holding them up as blockers. Being able to block, and then after blocks are declared, just tap down your whole team to get card advantage, seems really, really good to me. Like, sure, it's only particularly useful in very specific decks. If you are turning your guys sideways constantly to try to swing in and race your opponent, you're not going to get as much value off an ability like this. But I think there will be plenty of decks that want to utilize this. Reusable card advantage like this is amazing, and it not only just draws you a card, it makes sure to draw you gas, right? You're not going to hit a land off of this, it only grabs creatures. So I think this card's actually going to end up being really, really good. Next up, we've got Crescent Island Temple, a legendary enchantment shrine for 1 red and 3. When Crescent Island Temple enters, for each shrine you control, you make a 1/1 monk with prowess, and whenever another shrine you control enters, you make also a 1/1 monk with prowess. I think these shrines are really cool. I'm excited to find out if this can be an archetype in Limited. With this being an uncommon, it seems like that's the case. I'm really hoping there's enough shrine support to build that as a deck in Limited, because I think it'll be super fun. And I like how you don't lose value using this card one way or the other. If you play it early, every single shrine you play after that is still going to get you that token, so you didn't lose out on, you know, the batch of tokens you could create when you play this if you already have a bunch of them down. Likewise, the opposite is true. You know, if you end up top decking this later on in the game, you're not going to lose out on the value you would have generated turn after turn if this was down early. You're just going to make a whole batch of 1/1s as soon as you drop it. So I like that you can kind of use it on either end and still get all of the value. It's really nice. I'm excited to see if this actually works in Limited. Next up, we've got Honest Work, an enchantment aura for 1 blue mana. Enchants a creature an opponent controls. When this aura enters, you tap enchanted creature, remove all counters from it. Some extra silver lining value there that works against specific deck archetypes, whether it's +1/+1 counters decks, the earth bending mechanic. There's going to be an earth bending archetype. You can remove all the counters from an earth bent land and reduce it to just a 0/0. which is kind of sick. But the other part of this ability is that the enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a citizen with base power and toughness 1/1 that can also tap to add a colorless mana and becomes named Humble Merchant. Interesting card. I think turning their dude into a mana dork is a really, really big downside, and has me a little bit worried about this card. That being said, 1 mana removal in blue, you can't really expect much better than this, and the fact that you get the extra silver lining value by getting to remove counters and tap the creature down, even though it's only gonna tap it down for that 1 turn. It helps you get a little bit of a tempo lead. It helps you get in for more damage without them being able to use it as a chump blocker, at least for that turn. So you do have a little bit of silver lining value to make up for giving them a mana dork, but still, at the end of the day, giving them a mana dork is a little bit scary, so I don't know. We're gonna have to test this one, but you'd be hard-pressed to find better removal in blue for just 1 mana. Next up, we've got the Cave of Two Lovers. This is an enchantment saga for 1 red and 3. On chapter 1, you make 2 1/1 white ally creature tokens. On chapter 2, you search your library for a mountain or cave card, reveal it, put it to your hand. Chapter 3, you get to Earthbend 3, turning one of your lands into a 0/0 with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. And let me reiterate that the best part about Earthbending is if your opponent happens to kill that creature, then it comes back as the land without the counters, as the non-creature version of the land. So you don't have to worry about turning your lands into something that your opponent can kill with creature removal, and then you are, effectively giving them land destruction. You're turning their creature removal into land destruction spells. You don't have to worry about that, right? Your guys are coming back as lands if they die as the land creatures, and that is huge. That is such a big part about that ability, and honestly, that kind of makes it really, really good. This card gets you a lot of value. It's one of those cards that's going to slip under the radar a little bit, but you're basically getting 5 power, 5 toughness worth of value spread across 3 bodies, and you're searching for a mountain or cave, which is card advantage. I feel like something like this is going to be one of those cards that people underestimate, and they don't realize how good it ends up being until they actually play against it, and it's just chock full of value, especially as an uncommon. So I think this card is really cool. Another thing worth pointing out is I did not have the cave mechanic from Lost Caverns of Ixalan on my bingo card for synergies to show up in this set, and it absolutely is. So is chapter 2 going to make caves relevant again? Are we going to see a resurgence of maybe trying to make a cave deck work? This card alone, probably not, but I sort of see this chapter 2 as a signal that maybe we'll get a little bit more cave support. Maybe there'll be a few different cards that synergize with caves, and maybe that deck can try to be a deck for real this time. It never really got the chance to be a deck. It just wasn't quite there when Lost Caverns of Ixalan came out, but who knows, maybe this set can push it over the edge. Next up, we've got Seismic Sense. This is one of those cards that we saw at the official unveiling of the set a few months ago, but we'll go over it again really quick here since it was technically spoiled in day 1. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands you control. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And what makes this card so good is just the fact that it's a lesson. In older formats, being able to grab this out of your sideboard with learn cards could be really, really good if you're in a pinch and you absolutely need to dig for a specific card. And again, if Strixhaven brings back learn cards when that set launches later next year, maybe cards like this end up getting a lot better. Next up, we've got Solstice Revelations, an instant lesson for 1 red and 2. You can flash it back for 1 red and 6, and you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the spell's mana value is less than the number of mountains you control. If you don't cast that card this way, put it into your hand. This card has a ton of potential, and it's really hard to see exactly where it's going to go. I look at this card and I think Big Red wants to be a deck again, and if there's some way to get to 5 or 6 mountains, you play this for only 3 mana, but you hit a 5 or 6 drop and you get to play that for free. Well, now you get insane value. You still have like 2 or 3 mana left over to play another spell and still got like a 5 or 6 drop into play, which just could be an insane tempo swing. And then you can also just flash it back. If you flash it back later, like maybe you aren't saving mana. Excuse me. Maybe you aren't saving mana to play a second spell that turn, but you are flashing it back with 7 mana and probably having 7 mountains in play and maybe hitting something extra huge when you flash it back as well. So the card advantage combined with the ability to maybe cheat some stuff out earlier than you should makes this card one to keep your eye on. Big Red could be real again, and this could be a part of it, or this could just not quite be good enough and not make the cut. The fact that it's a lesson means theoretically in the future it could maybe end up in sideboards, which could make it even more powerful. I'm also super curious if there's a way to kind of abuse this and maybe play something off of it that has a very small cost technically, but maybe playing this card in order to play it gets you around some of the other cost, like alternative cost downsides to a card. Maybe if you guys can think of anything you could do that with, definitely let me know in the comments. I know in older formats, stuff like the suspend cards that don't actually have a cost, you could like hit and play off of a card like this and not just completely skip suspending them. So there could be something like that in Standard that you could pair this with and get some extra broken synergy. I'm not really sure, but if you guys have ideas about stuff like that, let me know in the comments, because I think the potential is there. Next up, we've got Sparring Dummy, a 1/3 artifact creature scarecrow with Defender for 1 green and 1. You can tap it to mill a card and then put a land card milled this way into your hand, gain 2 life if a lesson card is milled this way. I kind of love everything about this card for limited. It comes down, it stops aggro in its tracks. They can't even swing in with something with 1 toughness or it'll just eat it up. And then you also just get value off every turn off tapping this thing. You can block first and tap it after blocks, or tap it at the end of their turn to mill a card. If you're playing it in a lesson deck, you have the potential to gain life constantly. If you're playing it, in a land matters deck with like landfall triggers and stuff like that, you have the ability to keep filling up your hand with lands, if you hit the right cards off the top. There's a lot of little extra value, silver lining values to this card that I think make it really cool. But at the end of the day, it comes down and blocks super well onto, makes it really hard for aggro decks to do their thing. I don't necessarily think it's going to show up in Standard, but I could see it maybe being in some kind of a self-milled Delirium deck, something like that. It could be kind of cool. Mostly, I think this is just going to be a huge roadblock to aggro in Limited. Next up, we've got War Balloon, a 4/3 artifact vehicle with flying for 1 red and 2. You can pay 1 mana to put a fire counter on it. As long as this vehicle has 3 or more fire counters on it, it's an artifact creature, but it also accrues 3 to become an artifact creature. And this one's really interesting. I feel like in testing, maybe this had the station mechanic from Edge of Eternities, and they were trying to make this sort of vehicle that sits in between vehicles and the spacecrafts you could station, where you can crew it like a normal vehicle, but you can also like station it up to becoming a creature forever, and it had kind of both. And then for some reason, maybe they decided to pivot in testing and change it to these fire counters. Maybe there was just something that was not quite working or was too obtuse. But it definitely feels like this card sits right in the middle of those 2 mechanics, and it's kind of interesting. You can jam it out and hold it up to potentially use as a blocker the turn it comes out, even if you're out of mana. You just have to crew it with something else. Maybe you trade for something big in the air with your opponent that way, or just keep them from wanting to attack at all by having the option to crew this thing and trade with their guy, which is nice. But then once you have access to mana again, you can start putting fire counters on this and just turn it into a creature that never needs to crew again. And what's cool about that is you don't need to put all the fire counters on it right away. If you have just a little bit of incidental mana left over every turn, you could just, I have 1 mana I can't spend that I didn't use. I'll just dump it into the war balloon and put a fire counter on it. And then eventually it gets to the 3 and just becomes a creature. So there's a lot of ways to get extra value. It's also worth pointing out this works really well with firebending, because anytime you're attacking in and generating that mana in combat that has to be used during combat, you have a mana sink here where if some of that mana can't be used in better, more optimal ways, you just dump the extra mana into the ability, get fire counters, and at least get a little bit of value out of it. So all in all, I think there's a lot of different ways this card can be used in Limited. I think it's going to be really cool. It's not going to quite make the cut in Constructed, but really, really cool Limited card. Next up, we've got Trusty Boomerang, an artifact equipment for 1 colorless mana. Equipped creature has pay 1, tap target creature, return Trusty Boomerang to its owner's hand, and it equips for 1. Now, in a vacuum, I don't think this card is all that great. Every time you want to use it, it's going to cost you a total of 3 mana and tap down one of your creatures, because you're going to have to pay 1 to play it, pay 1 to equip it, pay 1 to use it, and tap your creature just to tap their creature. Thing comes back to your hand, you have to do all of that all over again every time. So especially for an uncommon, I don't feel like this is super powerful. I don't think it has the power level that we're used to seeing from uncommons. It kind of feels a little closer to a common to me, but I also take that as a sign that they have certain things in mind for this card. I think certain synergies you'll be able to utilize that aren't obvious to us yet because we haven't seen the whole set. I would not be surprised to see cards that care about how many permanents you play, or care about artifacts entering the battlefield, stuff like that, so that you get extra value out of returning this to your hand and replaying it, maybe being able to turn that downside into a pseudo upside. And we haven't really seen any mechanics that allow for that yet, at least I don't think we have. But if I was a betting man, I would assume there's something like that in this set, because otherwise I don't know how you justify this being an uncommon, unless there's just something that we're missing right now, a piece of the puzzle we don't quite see. So I have a feeling there's some sort of interesting mechanic, or just a couple of cards that trigger off artifacts entering, or something like that, that makes this card a little bit better when you pair it with the right things. So we'll have to wait and see. It'll be interesting to find out. But next up, we've got Energy Bending. This is an instant lesson for 2 colorless mana. You draw a card, first of all, to replace itself, which is nice, and then lands you control gain all basic land types until end of turn. This is especially useful if you want to turn on Domain. I think it's kind of cool for that. It's also cool for color fixing in a deck that has multiple colors, albeit you are color fixing at a 2 mana deficit, right? So you have to have an extra 2 mana left over on top of whatever you want to spend to play your thing that you're color fixing for, and that gets a little tricky. But it is also a lesson. It will trigger your lesson synergies, and again, if we get some of those learn cards down the line, a card like this gets a lot better when it's just kind of like a panic button that you can grab out of your sideboard to sort of fix yourself if you're desperate. That might make it a little bit better, so we're gonna have to wait and see what else comes. But next up, we've got Guru Pathic, a 2/4 legendary human monk ally for 4 mana in the colors of Simic. It is hybrid mana, so you don't have to be in both green and blue, just one or the other. And when Guru Pathic enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a Lesson, Saga, or Shrine card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. Whenever you cast a Lesson, Saga, or Shrine spell, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. I think this is a ton of value if you're using it in the right deck. And what I like the most about it is the fact that there are actually multiple archetypes you could use this in. You could just go super deep into Shrines and get value out of this card in that deck, or super deep into Sagas and get value there, or you could just go super deep into a Lesson deck, like a pure Lesson deck, and still get a bunch of value out of this guy. But what's really exciting is if you try to make some kind of overlapping synergies and like combine multiple of those archetypes into the same limited deck, that's where things can get really nutty with a card like this. You know, a deck that is maybe focused on enchantments that uses Sagas and Shrines, something like that. You're going to be able to get a lot of value. There's an outside chance that maybe a card like this could see play in Constructed if some of those archetypes end up being powerful enough. But I think at the end of the day, the 4 mana cost is going to be a little bit more than you want to see for constructed, because power, just power. And you know what? I'm not even going to call it power creep. I'm going to call it power leap. Power leap is a hell of a drug, right? So I don't know if this is quite there because of the 4 mana cost. But in limited, I actually think this is going to be incredibly versatile and see a lot of play in a number of different decks. Next up, we've got Hama the Bloodbender. And this one I actually think is kind of insane. A 3/3 legendary human warlock for 5 mana in the colors of Dimir. Again, another hybrid mana card, so you don't need to be in both black and blue, just one or the other. And when Hama enters, target opponent mills 3 cards, exile up to 1 non-creature non-land card from that player's graveyard. For as long as you control Hama, you may cast the exiled card during your turn by waterbending X rather than paying its mana cost, where X is its mana value. I just think this card is insane. This might even be good enough for constructed. It's definitely insane in limited, but the fact that you get value in 2 different ways off this. First of all, you get to exile literally their best non-creature non-land card and play it yourself, so you're getting that card advantage, and you can basically use mana as if it's mana of any color to play that card, because it has waterbending X, and that X cost is colorless. So you already kind of have that, which we sort of expect from cards like this, but then on top of it, it's not just a colorless mana cost, it's waterbending X, so you don't even need to pay the full cost. You can just tap a bunch of dudes. You could potentially tap a bunch of your guys and not even pay for the card at all, just get it for free, which seems kind of crazy to me. Get their best non-creature non-land card for free, or maybe even somewhere in between. It has the versatility of maybe you tap a few creatures and you don't have to pay as much. Maybe you can get a really expensive spell way earlier in the game because you're paying some of the mana but also tapping some creatures. So not only are you getting sheer value out of this, but you potentially just like cheat something out sooner than you otherwise could, which is kind of awesome. And then even if they don't have anything in their graveyard, it also just mills 3 cards when you first play it, which means it does have a little safety net attached to itself, where you get even more cards to choose from, and you don't have to worry about completely wasting it if your opponent doesn't have anything in the graveyard. So everything about this card I think is actually really, really cool. I'm excited to use it in limited, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some way for this to exist in constructed. Someone much smarter than me will figure that out, but if you have ideas, let me know in the comments, because I will absolutely build that deck and run it during early access. For those of you that don't know, early access is happening next Wednesday, I believe. What is the date on that? Wednesday, not the 5th, I think the 12th. I think Wednesday, November 12th is early access. I'll be doing a crazy long marathon stream, just playing all the crazy decks that you guys come up with ideas for, so let me know in the comments. Alright. Next up, we have Dai Li Agents, a 3/4 human soldier for 5 mana in the colors of Golgari. When it enters, you Earthbend 1 and then Earthbend 1 again, which is already kind of insane. You get 3 bodies with a total of 5/6 power and toughness for your 5 mana. But also, whenever this creature attacks, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them. So this turns into an insane win condition in a +1/+1 matters deck, or even just in an earthbending deck where all of your lands are going to be popping off becoming creatures with +1/+1 counters. This card could get absolutely nutty. But also used in conjunction with other earthbending synergies, it gets even better. There are some cards we've already seen that give keywords to creatures that have +1/+1 counters, that give keywords to all of your earthbent lands, and this card gets even better when you have stuff like that already in play. And then, like, we already saw the 2 mana green guy, what was the name of that dude? The Badger Mole Cub, I think. Badger Mole Cub is just insane. It earthbends 1, and then it makes it so that all your creatures tap for an extra green mana. So every single land that becomes a creature because of earthbending can make an extra mana. You can tap those earthbent lands for 2 mana each. when you have the 𝐸𝑑𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑐ℎ cub into play. So this gets way better with something like that in play. And when you realize all of the different things that are synergizing so well with this card, I actually think this card has a chance of seeing play in Standard, to be completely honest. 5 mana is a lot, so maybe not, because power creep is crazy these days. But the potential is still there. Getting 3 bodies with decent stats and the potential for all of those extra synergies lining up and a crazy game-ending attacker that's just going to drain for a bunch of life in the right deck. It's absolutely possible for this to see play in Standard. At the very least, this is going to be a must-pick card for the right archetypes in Limited. If you are in an Earthbent deck, you definitely want to jam this guy. If you can grab him early, this is probably a signpost card where you definitely want to go super deep into this kind of archetype, because the card will just end games. And it's worth pointing out that the drain life triggers on attack. You don't even have to deal combat damage in order to get it. So you could potentially just kill your opponent before they even get to choose who they're blocking with, which just seems kind of crazy to me. So everything about this card I love. It's so much value. Even if they use removal to take it out, you're still left with the 2 Earthbent 1 lands that are creatures. Leaves behind that value. Just everything about this card I love. I can't wait to play with it. Next up, we've got White Lotus Reinforcement, which is also really good. A 2/3 human soldier ally with vigilance for 3 mana in the colors of Selesnya, and other allies you control get +1/+1. So it's a lord for allies. But the thing you gotta keep reminding yourself about is the fact that allies are not just a normal tribe in this set. And so you're not just getting the normal value out of a normal tribal lord when you have a lord like this. Allies are like a super tribe in this set. There are so many allies. In fact, I'd be willing to say, based on the cards we've seen right now, that there's 50% of the creatures in this set are probably allies, which means a card like this goes way, way up in value in Limited, where even if you don't go super deep into allies as an archetype, you're just going to have a certain amount of allies in your deck just sort of on accident, no matter what, because there's just so many of them. So a card like this is even useful outside of like the super deep ally tribal archetype, just in a normal deck. But it gets even crazier if you go ally tribal. It should be really easy to just jam pack a deck with all of the best allies and go to town. And this card just goes way up in value in a deck like that. So if you're trying to play that deck, you definitely want to jam this guy super early. It's not going to table. But even outside of that deck, if this does happen to come around to you, it might be worth grabbing, because you're incidentally going to be buffing up a number of dudes in your deck kinda no matter what. I think this card is sick. Next up, we've got Sun Warriors, a 3/5 human warrior ally for 4 mana in the colors of Boros. Has Firebending X, where X is the number of creatures you control, which is insane potential for a lot of mana. And also has a mana sink. Pay 5 mana to create a 1/1 white ally creature token. Everything about this is awesome. If you're just going super wide with creatures, you could Firebend for a ton of mana, and at the very least, just channel that mana into its own ability to just shoot out 1/1s. And that alone could be nuts. But then if you have other activated abilities that you can put that mana into, sometimes that gets even better. And that's not even talking about like the instants in your hand you could have as like combat tricks that come out of nowhere that your opponent doesn't see coming, that can utilize that firebending mana in the middle of combat. So there's a lot of versatility with how powerful the firebending mechanic is, and a card like this that has the potential to give you an insane amount of mana and make sure that at the very least you have something on the floor to dump that mana into so it's never going to waste. Everything about that seems awesome to me. It's also an ally. We've already talked about how good allies are going to be in this set, so I would be very surprised if we didn't see some kind of crazy Naya ally deck be a really strong archetype in Limited. Even just looking at that last guy, White Lotus Reinforcements, if you got this guy already in play, buffing up all your allies, now every 5 mana that you shoot into this to make a 1/1 is actually making like a 2/2. All those guys are getting buffed. This card itself becomes a 4/6, like... So many crazy synergies. I can't wait to build. I can't wait to dive into Limited. It's going to be super fun. But next up, we have our first rare of the day, and this is actually one that was, again, spoiled when they unveiled the set for the first time a number of months ago. But we're going to go over it still for posterity because technically it was a spoiled card today. This is Momo Friendly Flyer, a 1/1 legendary lemur bat ally with flying for 1 white mana. The first non-lemur creature spell with flying you cast during each of your turns costs 1 less to cast, and whenever another creature you control with flying enters, Momo gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Everything about this card is awesome. Personally, I'm really excited to use it in Angel Tribal. I already have a deck on the channel that is Angel Tribal that's really good. It's called Nibiru. Check it out if you're interested because I think it's flying under the radar a little bit, and I think it's already a lot better than most people would give it credit for. But that deck is utilizing the 1-drop that we got in Edge of Eternities, the 1-drop Angel, the 2/1 with Vigilance. I forget the name, something Inquisitor. Forget the name off the top of my head, but that card's a really good 1-drop for Angels, and that's kind of what that deck always needed, was really good 1-drops and 2-drops to kind of curve out properly, and we sort of have them now. All we're missing is a second really good 1-drop so that we can consistently curve out starting on turn 1, and I think Momo does that for us. It'll make all of your angels, or at least the first one every turn, cost 1 less, and every single angel with flying that you play is going to buff it up. The only angel in the deck without flying is the other 1-drop. That's sort of your pivot plan B turn 1 play. So I think it's going to work out really well. Another thing that's worth mentioning is Bat Tribal. I think is going to get more powerful with this guy because he is a bat himself, which means he's going to be able to pick up all of those bat synergies and trigger off all those bats with flying, make all of those bats with flying cost less, but none of those bats are lemurs, which means you're not going to have to worry about not getting the cost reduction. So I think this card's just awesome. I think the Angel deck's going to be real. I think bats have a chance at being real in Standard. This will absolutely see play. Next up, we've got Tiger Seal, a 3/3 Vigilance for 1 blue mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you tap this creature. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you untap this creature. I think this card is nuts. At the very least, you play this for 1 mana, and it's a 3/3 blocker that stays untapped on your opponent's next turn, which is huge. 1 mana to just throw a huge roadblock into your opponent's aggro deck seems really good. But then if you can just draw 1 card during your next turn, it untaps, swings in with Vigilance on turn 2, just absolutely beats your opponent racing them out, and still gets to be held up as a blocker because of the Vigilance. This could be an insanely aggressive deck if done just right. Opt becomes a lot better. Anything that cheaply lets you draw 1 card gets a lot better. You just gotta find a way to just draw 1 extra card, just 1 extra card, and this guy becomes nuts. Will it see play in the Prowess decks? Do the Prowess decks use enough cards that cantrip? Is that gonna be the way people try to build things when Vivi's gone? Maybe. There's definitely a chance. I think this card definitely has to have a home somewhere. The potential for a blue aggro deck utilizing this guy, if you can just easily keep him untapped, just seems absolutely nuts to me. But next up, we've got Boiling Rock Rioter, as well as a nice cup of nectar. Oh, I needed that. It's nothing like a good cup of nectar of the gods. Boiling Rock Rioter, a 3/3 human rogue ally with Firebending 1 for 1 black and 2. You can tap an untapped ally you control, exile target card from a graveyard, and whenever this creature attacks, you may cast an ally spell from among cards you own exiled with this creature. I absolutely love everything about this. A 3/3 is decently statted for 3 mana to begin with, generates you a free mana during combat every time it swings. That's already value. But then you have multiple ways to create more value with this card. If your opponent has things in their graveyard that are going to get them value, you can just tap an untapped ally and exile it. You just have this built-in silver lining piece of value that you can get rid of problematic cards in your opponent's graveyard, which is nuts. But you can also pivot with that same ability, exile your own stuff, your allies, from your own graveyard so that you get to replay them, getting you card advantage. The fact that you can do either or of those things with this card, all while firebending, is kind of nuts. And another thing that's worth pointing out, that mana that you make with firebending, you're allowed to use that to recast the thing from the graveyard that you exiled, because you're allowed to play that thing from the graveyard that you exiled right then and there as a trigger when you're attacking, not at sorcery speed. So you get to generate a little bit of mana, so not only are you getting to basically play any ally from the graveyard, but you're getting to play it for like 1 mana less than what you normally would, because you're dumping your firebending mana in. And not only that, but if you have other firebenders, you can make even more mana that you can use to replay those allies that you're exiling from your graveyards. So there's just a ton of value here. Just any way you slice it, any way you look at it, this guy is offering up a lot. I'm excited to try to brew around it for standard. I definitely think there's a deck there. I don't know if it's a super deep firebending deck, or if it's an ally deck, or if it's some combination of the two, but there is definitely a deck here that's going to be sick. If you have ideas about how to build that, or how you'd like to see me build it, definitely let me know in the comments. We can try that out during early access. I think this guy's really awesome. Next up, we've got Day of Black Sun, a sorcery for 2 black and X. Each creature with mana value X or less loses all abilities until end of turn. Destroy those creatures. I absolutely love this. It cares about mana value, not power toughness. So if your opponent cheats something out that's super huge, you still only have to worry about getting to the mana value. It wipes out all tokens for just 2 mana, which I also think is kind of sick. But most importantly, all of the creatures lose their abilities before you destroy them, which means anything that's got like indestructible, stuff like that, you still wipe them out with a card like this. I think this is a really cool sweeper, and I think that's what Black needed. Black needed a new sweeper that was really, really interesting. This one reminds me a lot of the Meat Hook Massacre, but a fixed one, right? What made the Meat Hook Massacre a little bit pushed was its ability to affect life totals, combined with the fact that it was a permanent. You could maybe return it to your hand to replay it, stuff like that, or just let it sit there and do work, extra work, other than the creatures that it killed over the course of the game. So this kind of feels like a fixed Meat Hook Massacre. It can still be scalable sweep. If you can get something really expensive out, this will dodge it. So maybe this is like a sweeper of choice for reanimator decks, where you reanimate something huge, and then this can sweep everything that costs less than that huge thing, and that huge thing is just staying alive and running your opponent over. There could be some really cool things you can do with this card like that, and I'm kind of excited about really digging in and seeing where we can find a home for this card, because I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of decks that want to use it. I think Control will really like it, but again, I think certain creature decks that can design their deck in a way where this is dodging your own creatures and hitting theirs just seems super sick to me. So I'm excited to experiment with it and see where it fits. If you have ideas, let me know. Next up, we've got the Fire Nation Drill, a 6/3 legendary artifact vehicle with trample for 2 black and 2. When the Fire Nation Drill enters, you may tap it. When you do, destroy target creature with power 4 or less. It crews for 2, and you can also pay 1 mana, and permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This thing just does everything. For 4 mana, you're killing one of their power 4 or less creatures right away. It's basically removal. Not super efficient removal, a bit overcosted removal, but it is removal that you can flicker. And that's part of what I love about this. It kind of reminds me of a Chupacabra, Ravenous Chupacabra. I think this wants to be in a flicker deck, because every time you flicker it, you could kill something with power 4 or less. It's a little bit balanced because it can't hit any creature. It can only hit creatures with power 4 or less. But I still think there's some reusable value there that could be really good. But then you also just have a way to incidentally spend a mana to get around your opponent's hexproof and indestructible, which is kind of awesome as well, and just another like really weird out of left field thing that this can do. And then it could just be a creature with trample and a whopping 6 power that can just swing in out of nowhere for a very low crew cost and maybe just win you the game. So there's a lot about this card that I love. It feels like Ball Lightning and Ravenous Chupacabra jammed into one with this extra ability to get rid of your opponent's protection. All of that sounds awesome to me. This is definitely a card I want to try to build around. I think there could be some really fun decks, and the one I'm most excited to build is definitely Flicker. I think Flicker decks are finally going to have the gas they need after this set. There have been a lot of interesting cards that have come out in the last few sets that are going to be really usable with Flicker decks, but it just wasn't quite there yet. It was just a little bit lacking to really make an impact in the meta, and I think we've already seen multiple cards in this set that are going to absolutely turn Flicker decks into a thing after this set drops, and I am super excited to brew it. It's probably the deck I'm most excited to brew. If you have ideas about cards that could fit into that, let me know in the comments, because we're going to build it, baby. I'm excited. Next up, we've got Earth King's Lieutenant, a 1/1 creature human soldier ally for just 2 mana in the colors of Selesnya. He has Trample. When this creature enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each other ally creature you control, and whenever another ally you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This guy is insane for ally tribal. Absolutely nuts. He's going to make everything bigger. He's basically an Anthem. He's an Anthem that doesn't go away if your opponent removes him. Like, the Anthem stays, because it's in the form of +1/+1 counters that you're putting on all of those creatures. That alone is pretty nuts. But then every single creature you jam after him makes him bigger and bigger and bigger, and he's got Trample, so he can utilize those counters better too. And he's going to pick up all of your ally tribal synergies. He could pick up all of your human or soldier tribal synergies as well. Everything about this card is nuts. I can't wait to build ally tribal. This card is going to be a core part of that deck 100%. Next up, we've got the Lion Turtle, a 3/6 legendary Elder Cat Turtle with Vigilance and Reach for 3 mana in the colors of Simic. Tell me you're getting ready for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set without telling me you're getting ready for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set. There's definitely going to be a turtle deck right after that set drops. And this is one of those cards that's kind of setting us up with some cards that are eventually going to be in that kind of deck. So 3/6 Vigilance Reach for 3 mana is already kind of nuts. When it enters, you gain 3 life. It can't attack or block unless there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard, but you can tap it to add a mana of any color. So no matter what, as soon as you drop it, you get a 3/6 that gains you 3 life, taps for a mana of any color, and can be used for things like fight spells and bite spells to like kill your opponent's stuff, even if it can't attack or block yet. But obviously the main way you want to use this is in some kind of a lesson deck. If you can just consistently have enough lessons in your graveyards early enough, like, this is insane. A 3/6 Vigilance Reach for 3 mana with all of this extra value tacked on can be absolutely nuts. The key is just consistently getting to those 3 lessons in your graveyard as early as possible, like as soon as you drop this guy, so you can get the absolute most out of the card. And I'm super curious to know if a deck like that's actually going to work in Standard. Is the lesson deck going to be real? And if so, is this card a part of it? Is this the direction that that deck goes? Hard to say, but I'm excited to find out. Next up, we've got Wan Shi Tong Librarian, the first mythic of the day. And this card seems absolutely insane to me. A 1/1 legendary bird spirit with flash, flying, and vigilance for 2 blue and X. When Wan Shi Tong enters, you put X +1/+1 counters on him and then draw half X cards rounded down. Whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. This card seems absolutely busted to me. It seems like a better Hydroid Krasis. And when I put this card out as a spoiler short in my spoiler shorts playlist last night, I had someone respond to that short saying like, oh, it's not better. Hydroid Krasis is better because when you play Hydroid Krasis, you get the ability in a way that it can't be countered, right? And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That definitely does make Hydroid Krasis more valuable in that way. But I would argue that having Flash gives you another way to get around your opponent's counterspells and be even trickier. So the fact that you can still, if you're a smart enough player and making the right decisions at the right moments, get around your opponent's counterspells with this, but also have access to having a flash blocker that blows them out in the middle of combat because it comes in with a bunch of +1/+1 counters and just blocks with flying is nuts. And then the fact that it can get bigger and draw you cards as the game goes on, which is something Hydroid Krasis could never do. This can just continue to get you card advantage and get even bigger every time your opponent searches their library. And sure, that works for tutors, but it also works for any sort of card draw that requires your opponent to search their library to find a card, like search the top however many cards of their library, things like that. So I just think all in all, even though Flash is slightly worse than the Hydroid Krasis' ability to dodge counter spells and still keep, you know, the card advantage, still keep the card draw, it's close enough. And that combined with the ability to draw even more cards as the game goes on and get even bigger and have the flying and vigilance, like all of it as a package, I do think it's overall better than Hydroid Krasis. You do have to be a little bit more careful and play very cleverly to make sure to get around counterspells and stuff like that. But I think this card is just nuts. I think this card is absolutely insane. And I kind of expect to see it everywhere. The only way we don't is if aggro is just way too good for a card like this to exist and the game's just over before you can capitalize on what this card is bringing to the table. And if that's the case, then Standard's cooked regardless, right? So I'm really hoping this sees a lot of play. Next up, we've got Sozin's Comet. This card's nuts. This card is crazy. Why did they reprint like a super dark ritual? This is a sorcery for 2 red and 3. Each creature you control gains fire breathing 5 until end of turn. And as if that wasn't enough, you can foretell for 1 red and 2. So, with even just one creature gaining the firebending, you get the mana back that you spent to even play this, right? And you gotta remember that firebending triggers on attack. So even if your opponent blocks and kills a bunch of your dudes, all of them are still triggering firebending. If you attack with 4 dudes, you're getting 20 mana. 20 mana in the middle of combat to dump into abilities, to play instants, whatever you can manage to muster up. That is absolutely insane. And then it just gets crazier from there because you could just foretell it. You know, you just pay 2, tuck it away. Not only is it only going to cost you 3 when you finally pull the trigger, so that with even just one attacker, you're still making an extra 2 mana there. But also it's tucked away in exile, so your opponent can't make you discard it. It protects it from discard spells as well. So there's just so much value in this card. Like it really does seem like a super dark ritual to me. I had to reread it. Like all you have to do is attack with a couple creatures. You just attack with 2, just 2, and this thing's gonna give you like what, 8 mana? Like 8? Do you know what you can do with 8 mana in today's Magic with the power creep that we have right now? Like this is crazy. Like, sure, there's the additional hoop that you can only spend the mana during combat, right? But there's still got to be plenty of cards, plenty of instant speed cards that can get you insane value off of crazy mana generation like this. And at the very least, there's definitely some crazy, like, mana sink abilities you can dump mana into. This card just looks all sorts of crazy to me. It's no wonder it's a mythic. I think this card's going to be everywhere. I think people are going to be trying to break this immediately during early access. We will try to build a deck around it. Is it a big red deck? Is it some kind of weird, out of nowhere, out of left field deck? Hard to say. You're going to need a bunch of creatures to trigger that firebending, but you're going to need some really good mana payoffs as well. So I don't know exactly what that deck looks like yet, but we're absolutely going to build it at some point. And if you have ideas, let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got Secret of Bloodbending. This is another mythic that looks absolutely absurd. 4 blue mana for a sorcery lesson. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may waterbend 10. So 14 mana, or maybe tap some creatures to reduce that waterbend cost. You control target opponent during their next combat phase. If this spell's additional cost was paid, you control that player during their next turn instead. And then exile Secret of Bloodbending. So Mindslaver is back. Mindslaver is back, and it's back as a blue spell. You don't even have to risk playing an artifact and your opponent using artifact removal before you get to use the artifact, like with Mindslaver. Like, you just catch your opponents with their pants down and just take everything. Oh my god. Even just for the 4 blue mana, controlling their combat is nuts. Force them to attack with things you can easily block and kill, so they lose a bunch of creatures. Force them to not attack with the things that would get through for damage, so that they're not able to. It's not just that you control their combat phase, you control them during their next combat phase. So you could have a really good attacker and you don't want them to attack with it, so you don't, but if it has a tap ability, you can still use its tap ability to make sure you tap it down in the middle of combat, just so that it's not up as a blocker when it comes back to being your turn. Like, there's so many little bits of nuance here that I think is easy to overlook. Just controlling their next combat phase can be more powerful than what it seems, because you can still do a bunch of instant speed things during their combat phase, make them waste all of the instants in their hands, or, you know, dump all of their mana into abilities that are arbitrary, that don't matter. As long as it's happening during their combat phase, you can do all of that stuff, right? Pretty crazy. But then if you can just pay the waterbending cost, if you just have 10 creatures, if you're in a go wide deck and you can just tap 10 creatures when you play this, you just control their whole turn, right? And then you can do even more. You can make them waste sorcery speed stuff. You can make sure they've got no blockers. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm really excited to see what people try to cook up with this card, what kind of decks they try to brew. If you have ideas about brewing decks with this one, I know I've said that a few different times this video, but definitely let me know in the comments. This card seems crazy. We have to brew something around it, right? And in older formats, this card just gets absolutely absurd because you still have access to learn cards. In older formats, you can just have this in your sideboard and get it whenever you want and just use it if it's going to win you the game. And if not, pivot and find a different lesson. Like, that seems absurd to me. And if learn spells end up coming back in the next Strixhaven set next year, this card's going to be bananas. But like I said, if you have ideas on how to build around this, let me know in the comments. I think this card is absolutely absurd. Next up, we've got White Lotus Tile. This is a Lotus, but don't let that fool you. It's not crazy. It's still good though. Artifact for 4 colorless mana. It enters tapped. Tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a creature type in common. I think this card is really cool. It is a little bit expensive, and it does enter tapped, which is like the biggest problem. But I feel like if it entered untapped, it might kind of be broken. There's just way too much possibility to just play it and immediately tap it for more mana than it costs you to play it, right? So I get it. I get why it comes in tapped. There's still a lot of potential here. You can run this in any tribal deck that goes super wide, super quick, and get a metric ton of mana out of it. You could get even more if you can find a way to untap an artifact and just use it the turn that you play it. That could be absolutely crazy. It's really hard for me to envision exactly what kind of a deck this would go in right now. I feel like the possibilities are kind of endless, so I don't know which tribe would be best to try to use. We definitely want one that goes super wide, super quick. If you have ideas about that, let me know. I think this one's cool. If I was a betting man, I would probably bet that this doesn't really see any huge amount of play in Standard. It just seems like most of the Lotus cards we get that are a little expensive and a day late and a dollar short, kind of, in a way. That being said, I have been wrong before, and there is absolutely potential for some crazy combo deck to come out of nowhere where you play this and immediately untap it with something else and get a ton of mana out of it and just combo out for a win out of nowhere. There's absolutely potential for something like that, so we're going to have to wait and see what people do with it. Next up, we have what I think is the last card of today, and that's the Legend of Roku, an enchantment saga for 2 red and 2. On chapter 1, you exile the top 3 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. Chapter 2, you add 1 mana of any color. So chapter 1 and 2 are kind of small, but Chapter 3 makes up for it. Exile this saga, return it to the battlefield, transformed under your control. Comes back as Avatar Roku, which is absolutely insane. A 4/4 legendary avatar with Firebending 4, so when it attacks, you'll just generate 4 red mana. You can only use that mana during combat. It has a mana sink for 8 mana, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying and Firebending 4. That's the huge part of this card. You dump 8 mana to make a 4/4 flyer that can get you back 4 mana when it attacks. So if you can invest in this guy early and your opponent can't kill him quick enough, you immediately start to flood the board with dragons that can attack and give you the mana that you need to flood the board with more dragons. And it just snowballs into insanity. I hope I'm right about this card. I think it could be absolutely nuts. Excuse me, I think it could be absolutely nuts in just the right deck. Oh, glorious coffee. I don't know what the rest of the deck looks like. This is another card that makes me think that like Big Red might be coming back in a big way. You also have to dodge removal. If they kill this before you can get it going, it's going to feel pretty bad. But there's a ton of potential here. The ceiling on this card is absolutely insane. I can't believe that the dragons have Firebending 4. That gets out of control so quick. So I'm just excited to see where this card goes. I have no idea what that deck's going to look like, but there is absolutely going to be a deck that utilizes this, and it's going to be sick, man. I can't wait to try to brew with it. If you have ideas, again, I know I've said that a lot about a bunch of these cards, but definitely let me know in the comments. This is just one of those cards that's screaming to be broken, even though, I mean, it dies to removal, right? So who knows, but there's still a ton of potential in this card, and Firebending in general just seems like it's going to be crazy, like way crazier than I thought when it was first spoiled. So I'm excited to see where that mechanic goes and where this card goes. I think there's a lot of potential. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for checking it out. It really does mean the world to me. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I have another spoiler video on the way, on the heels of this one very soon, and a bunch of other content coming. So I'll see you on the next video. Until then. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.